Have you ever felt like no matter how clearly you speak, someone still chooses to misunderstand you? Like your truth gets twisted the moment it leaves your mouth? It's not just frustrating, it's exhausting. You explain your heart, your intentions, your reasons, again and again, hoping they'll finally see you for who you really are. But they don't. Or worse, they do, and they just don't care. They smile while doubting you, they nod while judging you, and deep inside, you're left wondering why being honest feels like a battle. The truth is, not every person you meet is interested in understanding you. Some are only interested in controlling you. You think you're having a conversation. You think if you explain yourself better, if you're more patient, more calm, more clear, things will change. But they won't. Because you're not actually speaking to someone who wants resolution. You're speaking to someone who feeds off the conflict. The longer they keep you confused, the longer they keep you small. The more you doubt yourself, the more they feel in control. This isn't connection, it's a power game. And the moment you start seeing it for what it really is, something inside you changes. You start realizing that not everyone is at war with you. Some people are just at war with themselves. And when they lose that inner war, they don't go quietly. They spread that chaos. They become critics. They become manipulators. They become experts at making you feel like you're the problem. They wear masks, polite, friendly, even caring. But their energy always betrays them. You walk away from conversations with them feeling drained, defensive, and doubting your own reality. That's not love. That's not growth. That's emotional sabotage. But here's the powerful truth. You don't have to keep participating. You don't owe endless explanations to people who have already decided not to see you. You don't need to convince someone who's already committed to misunderstanding you. Your voice is not a tool for their amusement. Your truth is not a performance. You were never meant to argue for your worth. You were meant to live it. And once you stop explaining yourself to those who aren't listening, you'll notice something beautiful begin to happen. You'll find peace in your silence, power in your presence, clarity in your boundaries. You'll stop shrinking and start expanding. Because the moment you stop handing your truth to people who distort it, you start attracting people who honor it. So stay with this. Watch until the end. Because this isn't just about cutting off toxicity. It's about reclaiming the voice you've spent too long defending. It's about standing tall in your truth without apology. It's about finally realizing you don't have to fight to be seen by everyone. You only need to stop explaining yourself to the ones who never really wanted to see you in the first place. You've spent too long giving the best parts of yourself to people who only came to take. You've poured patience into conversations that drained your spirit. You've offered kindness to hearts that twisted it into weakness. And you've explained your truth to those who never deserved access to it in the first place. That ends now, because the problem was never your clarity. It was their refusal to understand, their refusal to listen, their refusal to meet you where you stood, even when you were standing wide open, offering your soul with both hands. You are not difficult. You are not too much. You are not wrong for wanting peace, truth, or real connection. But you've been conditioned to think you are. Conditioned to believe that if someone doesn't get you, it must be your fault. So you try harder, you speak softer, you make yourself smaller, more agreeable, more digestible, until one day you can't even hear your own voice without wondering how it will be received. That is not growth, that is self-erasure, and it's time to stop letting it happen. There are people in this world who only feel tall when they make others feel small, people who confuse dominance for confidence, who mistake fear for respect. They interrupt, invalidate, and spin your words, not because you're wrong, but because your clarity threatens their control. They poke holes in your peace to see how fast you'll scramble to patch it. They love watching you explain, backtrack, justify, because it gives them the illusion of authority over your reality. But it's just that, an illusion, and you're done feeding it. You don't owe explanations to anyone who distorts your intentions. You don't need to sit through interrogations disguised as conversations. You don't have to keep translating your truth into a language someone refuses to understand. It's not your job to carry their fear, their bitterness, or their unwillingness to grow. You are not responsible for making someone comfortable with the parts of you they choose to reject. You are responsible for protecting your energy, your truth, your future. There is freedom waiting for you on the other side of silence. Not silence that hides you, but silence that shields you. Silence that says, I know who I am, and I don't need your permission to exist. That silence is strength. That silence is self-respect. And it's time you return to it. Because when you stop explaining, you start healing. You stop negotiating your worth and start embodying it. You stop begging to be seen and start standing in the light of your own becoming. The moment you stop giving your voice to the wrong ears, you start hearing it with new power. That's when transformation begins. Not when others finally understand you, but when you finally decide that their understanding is no longer required. Keep going. You're remembering who you are. If someone truly wanted to understand you, they would. They would listen. They would ask. They would lean in with curiosity instead of crossing their arms with judgment. But when someone consistently twists your words, dismisses your feelings, or challenges your every move, it's not confusion, it's strategy. They're not seeking clarity. They're seeking control. And the longer you keep explaining yourself, the more power you give them to rewrite your story with their narrative. That's how it starts. Not with shouting, but with subtle resistance. Not with open conflict, but with constant doubt. And soon, you begin questioning not just what you said, but who you are. This is what they want. They want you tangled in overthinking. They want you rewriting your sentences in your mind 1,000 times before you speak. They want you defensive, apologetic, disoriented. Because as long as you're explaining yourself, you're not trusting yourself. And if you don't trust yourself, you'll be easier to mold, easier to shame, easier to break. That is the game. And whether you realize it or not, every time you try to justify your worth to someone who's already chosen not to see it, you are playing that game on their terms. But there's a moment when something shifts, when your inner voice, tired of being muted, rises up with quiet defiance, when it says, no more defending what is already true, no more bending just to fit into someone else's box, no more living on trial in conversations that were never meant to free you, only to cage you. This moment is not loud, it's not dramatic, but it is powerful, it is final. It is the moment you walk out of the prison of needing to be understood. Because here is the truth that changes everything. Not being understood does not mean you are wrong. It does not mean you are broken. It does not mean you need to work harder to earn someone's approval. It only means that you've been speaking your truth to the wrong audience. And once you recognize that, you reclaim something sacred. You reclaim your time. You reclaim your peace. You reclaim the space inside your mind that was once occupied by the echo of someone else's doubt. You are not here to be endlessly explained. You are here to be expressed. You are here to live fully, to love boldly, to stand in your truth without apology. The right people will feel your energy without needing subtitles. They will understand your silence just as much as your words. But first, you have to stop handing your story to those who only want to edit it. You have to stop asking for recognition from those who benefit from your invisibility. This is your liberation. This is your turning point. The moment you realize that explaining yourself to those who thrive on misunderstanding you is the very thing keeping you small. And you were never meant to be small. There's a certain kind of silence that speaks louder than 1,000 explanations. It doesn't beg to be understood. It doesn't chase validation. It simply exists, solid, unmoved, undeniable. And that silence is born the moment you stop defending your truth to people who are committed to denying it. It is the moment your self-worth is no longer tied to someone else's willingness to believe in it. Because deep down, you've always known what you feel. You've always known what's right for you. The noise came when you started handing that knowing over to people who used it against you. It's not your responsibility to walk someone through your every choice, your every boundary, your every decision. You don't owe a dissertation for being at peace. You don't have to justify the steps you take when you're trying to grow. But this world will convince you otherwise if you let it. It will teach you to second-guess your instincts and apologize for your healing. It will condition you to believe that every no needs a backstory and every yes needs permission. That's how you lose yourself, one tiny compromise at a time, until your identity becomes a performance for people who aren't even paying attention. But you weren't born to perform. You were born to embody, to stand in the fullness of who you are, without shame, without fear, without trimming the edges to fit someone else's limited vision. The moment you stop explaining is the moment you step into your authority. And it's not arrogance. It's alignment. It's knowing that your life isn't a courtroom and you're not on trial. It's realizing that your peace matters more than someone's distorted perception of you. You can love people and still remove access. You can be kind and still go quiet. You can forgive and still walk away. Because protecting your energy is not cruelty, it's clarity. When you stop engaging with those who pull you into emotional chaos, you begin to see how much of your power was spent on people who never deserved it. And what once felt like loss starts to feel like liberation. You're not difficult. You're just no longer willing to dilute yourself to be understood by people who refuse to do the work to understand themselves. And that's strength. That's growth. That's maturity. You've learned that silence is not weakness. It's wisdom. It's the choice to invest your energy in places that water you, not drain you. The real shift happens when you no longer feel the urge to explain, when you trust your path so deeply that another person's confusion doesn't shake it, when you stop performing clarity for those who thrive on misunderstanding. That is when the healing takes root. That is when the real transformation begins. And in that silence, something beautiful rises. Peace, power, and the unshakable truth that you never needed to explain what was already real within you. When you finally stop explaining yourself, you begin to feel something most people never experience: inner quiet. That stillness isn't emptiness, it's presence. It's what's left when the noise of justification disappears. When your voice is no longer tangled in defense, you start to hear something clearer, your own truth, stripped of apology, firm in its foundation. That quiet is the return of power, not loud, not arrogant, just unshakable. It's the moment you realize you've been speaking too much to the wrong ears and listening too little to your own knowing. There is no peace in convincing people who are committed to misunderstanding you. It is a cycle of emotional exhaustion disguised as care. You think you're being open, being vulnerable, being honest, but what you're really doing is handing your truth over to people who only use it as a weapon. Every time you explain yourself to them, you're offering more ammunition. And every time they pretend not to understand, they pull the trigger on your self-worth. This is not miscommunication. This is manipulation. And the most dangerous part? It makes you believe the problem is you. But the problem is not you. The problem is that you've allowed people into your sacred space who were never meant to be there. You've invited opinions into places where only discernment should live. You've asked for clarity from voices rooted in chaos. That's why your peace keeps slipping away, because you've been defending it instead of protecting it. You've been negotiating your boundaries instead of enforcing them. And that stops the moment you choose silence over struggle. Silence is not passive. It's a boundary. It's a filter. It removes what explanation never could. It doesn't beg. It doesn't chase. It simply makes room for truth to stand on its own. The right people will recognize that truth without needing it repackaged. The wrong ones will be offended by your lack of desperation. Let them be. Your life is not a campaign. Your purpose is not up for debate. When you remove the need to explain, you begin to see how much time you've wasted translating your soul into languages it was never meant to speak. You realize how many conversations were never about understanding but about control. And in that realization, you reclaim what's yours: your energy, your clarity, your self-respect. You stop trying to be understood and start being aligned. That shift changes everything. You're not cold. You're clear. You're not rude. You're rooted. You're not distant. You're discerning. The more you grow, the less you explain. Not because you don't care, but because you finally do. You care enough about your peace to protect it from small minds. You care enough about your growth to stop shrinking for approval. You care enough about your truth to stop laying it at the feet of people who only want to step on it. And in that care, in that stillness, you rise, not louder, just unshakable, just free. Not everyone around you wants your healing. Some are more comfortable with your confusion, because the moment you rise, the moment you become clear, the moment you stop asking for understanding, you become a mirror they can't escape. Your growth exposes their stagnation. Your clarity threatens their control. Your confidence challenges every false version of you they've depended on to feel superior. That's why they resist you. That's why they question your motives, mock your boundaries, and dismiss your voice. It was never about truth. It was about maintaining the dynamic where you stayed small and they stayed dominant. You've been taught that explaining yourself is a form of respect. But real respect is mutual, not begged for. When someone constantly demands an explanation for your peace, your choices, or your silence, it's not respect they're after, it's access. Access to your mind, access to your emotions, access to the parts of you they haven't earned. And if you keep handing it to them, you become complicit in your own depletion. There is a difference between being open and being exposed. There is a difference between being honest and being drained. Wisdom knows where to speak. Power knows when to walk away. You were not put here to constantly manage the emotional reactions of others. You were not created to exist as someone else's explanation. You were made to stand in your truth, to evolve without permission, and to grow beyond the limits others place on you. If that offends someone, let it. If that confuses someone, so be it. You are not obligated to keep shrinking, so others feel comfortable. You are not responsible for explaining your transformation to people who only want the older, more manageable version of you. Healing will isolate you, but it will also reveal you. It will show you who genuinely wants your light, and who only tolerated your shadows because they were easier to control. Don't fear that exposure. Let it purify your space. Let it cleanse your circle. When you stop explaining, you force the truth to the surface. You strip away performance. You remove the masks, yours and theirs. And what's left is real. What's left is clean. What's left is undeniable. The more rooted you become, the quieter you'll grow. Not because you don't have anything to say, but because you've realized not everyone deserves to hear it. Your peace is not up for public opinion. Your boundaries are not debate topics. Your evolution is not a group project. The less you explain, the more powerful you become. Not because you're hiding, because you're done handing your power to people who mistake your openness for obligation. Keep growing. Keep rising. Keep protecting your truth with sacred silence. You don't need to be louder to be seen. You don't need to be softer to be loved. You only need to be honest with yourself. And once you are, no one's misunderstanding can move you. Not anymore. Not ever again. When someone constantly challenges your reality, it's not curiosity. It's control. They don't want clarity. They want to unsettle you. They want you second-guessing your voice, tiptoeing around your truth, hesitating before every word. Because as long as you stay tangled in explaining, you're not standing in power. You're spinning in self-doubt. And that's where they thrive. In that hesitation. In that confusion. In the space between what you know and what they make you question. That is not love. That is not respect. That is emotional sabotage disguised as misunderstanding. There's a moment in your growth when you realize the most dangerous people are not the ones who scream at you. They're the ones who keep asking you to explain yourself while quietly disarming your confidence. They cloak their disrespect in questions. They wear concern like a mask. They use phrases like, "I just want to understand," while secretly hoping to dismantle what makes you strong. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you feel the pattern, the loop, the cycle of endless defending, you know something must change. You stop offering explanations like gifts to those who never valued them. You stop laying your soul on tables built to dissect, not to nourish. You stop responding to every accusation, every doubt, every subtle jab dressed as a question. And not because you don't care, but because you finally do. You care enough about your energy to stop wasting it. You care enough about your growth to stop repeating yourself to those who are committed to misunderstanding you. You care enough about your peace to stop arguing with people who are only looking for control, not connection. Let them think what they want. Let them build whatever version of you their mind needs to feel safe. That's no longer your concern. Your job is not to correct every lie. Your job is not to defend every decision. Your job is to live your truth so clearly that even their noise becomes irrelevant. You are not here to win their approval. You are here to walk your path without apology. That's the shift. That's the power. That's the place where true freedom lives. There is nothing more threatening to someone who feeds on your uncertainty than your silence. Not silence as avoidance, but silence as clarity. Silence that says, "I no longer owe you this access." Silence that says, "I know who I am, and I don't need you to agree." That kind of silence is a boundary. That kind of silence is a weapon against manipulation. That kind of silence ends cycles. You don't need to explain your worth. You need to embody it. You don't need to argue for your voice. You need to use it where it matters, and where it doesn't, you walk away. Not out of anger, out of alignment. That's where you belong, not in the noise, in the knowing, in the stillness that no longer bends to be heard, because it has finally remembered that being heard was never the goal, being whole was. Wholeness doesn't come from being understood by others. It comes from finally choosing to understand yourself. You've spent so much time trying to be clear for them, trying to be kind for them, trying to be digestible for them. And somewhere along the way, you forgot what your own voice sounds like without their echo in the background. You've mistaken tolerance for love, compliance for connection, and self-erasure for maturity. But the truth is, if understanding you requires shrinking, it's not understanding, it's suppression. And if being loved means constant defense, it's not love, it's dependence dressed as devotion. People who carry chaos don't want peace. They crave control, even if it means disrupting yours. They'll smile as they poke holes in your clarity. They'll laugh while you unravel trying to explain what was never confusing in the first place. They don't need more of your truth. They already see it. What they want is for you to doubt it. Because when you doubt it, you become manageable. And when you become manageable, they feel powerful. That's the game. And the only way to win it is to stop playing. You don't need another rehearsed conversation. You don't need another long message explaining your heart. What you need is to reclaim your center. To remember that you are not here to live in constant justification. You are not a walking apology for being who you are. You are not required to dim your depth for shallow minds. And you are certainly not responsible for holding the emotions of people who refuse to hold themselves accountable. That weight is not yours. It never was. You can be clear and still be misunderstood. You can be honest and still be twisted. You can be pure and still be painted as a threat, because your very presence calls people out without saying a word. Your boundaries make insecure people uncomfortable. Your silence makes manipulative people nervous. Your strength will always offend those who rely on your weakness. That's not your burden to carry. That's their reflection to face. And if they choose not to, let them stay blind. You're not here to open eyes that were never meant to see you. True peace comes when you finally stop editing yourself for comfort. Stop begging for closure. Stop explaining your evolution to people who've already shown they're committed to misunderstanding your existence. Your healing is not a committee decision. Your peace does not require group consensus. And your next chapter doesn't need permission from characters who don't belong in it. Let them talk. Let them guess. Let them label what they cannot touch. You are not here to correct the story in their head. You are here to write the one you were born to live. So step forward. Let your silence protect you. Let your truth carry you. And let your energy speak louder than your explanations ever could. You are done explaining. You are becoming. And that is more than enough. Every time you explain yourself to someone who's already made up their mind about you, you give away something sacred, not your truth. That's still yours. But your peace, your center, your stillness. You hand it over in pieces, hoping that if you just say it the right way, they'll finally hear you. But they won't. Not because your words aren't clear, but because their intent isn't clean. You're speaking from truth, but they're listening from ego. And that gap is unbridgeable. You can't reason with someone whose goal is not understanding, but control. You can't soften yourself enough to be safe in the hands of someone who sees your softness as weakness. That's not connection. That's slow destruction disguised as concern. The need to explain comes from a deep place, a place that wants to be seen, to be validated, to be understood. But there's a danger in constantly seeking that validation from people who are committed to distorting you. You become addicted to defending yourself. You begin to think that maybe if you just explain it better, if you stay calm enough, polite enough, open enough, they'll see you clearly. But they won't. Because it's not clarity they fear. It's the power of your clarity. It's the authority you reclaim when you stop playing their game. That's why they keep baiting you. That's why the moment you try to rise, they try to pull you back into the noise. You don't owe clarity to people who trade in confusion. You don't owe answers to those who twist questions into weapons. You owe yourself one thing, freedom. The freedom to walk away. The freedom to be misunderstood without crumbling. The freedom to trust your inner knowing more than their false narrative. That's the real test. Not how well you explain yourself, but how long you're willing to stand in silence and let the truth speak without your voice having to defend it. Let them misunderstand you. Let them think you're cold. Let them assume you're arrogant, distant, or selfish. You don't exist to fix their perception. You exist to be whole. And sometimes wholeness means being seen as difficult by those who benefited from your silence. Sometimes peace looks like letting the false version of you die in their minds so the real version of you can breathe in your life. That's not abandonment. That's alignment. You were not made to beg for understanding. You were made to embody it. And the more you do, the less you'll need to explain. You'll stop trying to translate your soul into a language they never intended to learn. You'll stop making your peace negotiable. And most of all, you'll stop asking people to meet you where they've already shown they're unwilling to go. You will rise, not louder, not harsher, but clearer. And in that clarity, you will remember. You never needed to explain what was always real within you. You only needed to believe it. Belief in yourself is not loud. It doesn't scream. It doesn't fight to be heard. It simply is. Quiet, grounded, unshakable. And when you stop explaining yourself to those who don't deserve the weight of your words, that belief begins to rise. Not because you finally convinced them, but because you finally stopped trying. You're no longer performing emotional gymnastics to win over people who were never meant to hold space for your truth. You're no longer spending energy softening your light for eyes that only squint at anything too real. What used to feel like rejection now starts to feel like release. Because the less you explain, the more you understand. Some people were never supposed to understand you. And that's the freedom most never reach. The freedom to be fully, unapologetically seen by yourself, without needing someone else to co-sign your worth, without shrinking into labels that make other people comfortable. You begin to see that explaining was a form of survival. You were trying to stay accepted. You were trying to feel safe. But safety bought through self-betrayal is not safety. It's slow suffocation. And the moment you realize this, the moment you feel the ache of how much of yourself you've handed over just to be tolerated, you make a different choice. You stop pleading. You stop convincing. You stop translating your depth into a language made for shallowness. The right people will not require explanations to honor your boundaries. The right people will not make your healing feel like a debate. The right people will feel your silence and still know your heart. And until those people arrive, you owe it to yourself to protect your space from the ones who came only to misunderstand you. Because the damage isn't just in being unseen, it's in what you start believing about yourself when someone refuses to see you. That's where the real danger lives. In the internalization of their denial, in the subtle way you begin to question your intentions, doubt your path, compromise your voice just to keep peace that was never mutual. But you are remembering now. You are returning, not to who you were before the world asked you to explain, but to the version of you that no longer feels the need to. The version that doesn't chase closure where there's only ego. The version that doesn't argue with projections. The version that knows peace isn't found in defending your name, but in living it fully, with nothing to prove and nothing to hide. That version is not born through approval. It's born through release. So let it all fall away. The need to justify, the need to please, the need to be understood by those who only listen to judge. Let it die. Let it burn. Because from that fire rises someone stronger, someone clearer, someone who no longer performs for love, but simply becomes it, without apology, without defense, without explanation. Just truth, embodied. And that is more than enough. Unusual activity has been detected from your device. Try again later. 96A5, E39639, FB92 FF0 Chi. There is nothing more powerful than becoming immune to misunderstanding. Not cold, not bitter. Free from the constant need to be interpreted correctly. Free from explaining your soul to people who only came close enough to dissect it. Free from the pressure to make your boundaries sound soft enough to be accepted by those who never intended to respect them. That freedom isn't a wall, it's a return to yourself. A return to the voice inside you that doesn't ask for permission to exist. A return to the version of you that knows being seen clearly is not a requirement for being whole. You don't need to make sense to those who fear your growth. You don't need to adjust your healing to fit their expectations. When someone resists your truth, they are not reacting to you. They are reacting to the part of themselves that your truth confronts. That's not your problem to fix. Their discomfort is not your responsibility. Their confusion is not your burden. Their approval is not your reward. Your reward is the peace that comes when you no longer betray your voice just to be heard by someone who already decided not to listen. That is how you rise. Not by convincing others to love you correctly, but by loving yourself so completely that their misjudgment loses all power. You stop internalizing projections. You stop defending your decisions to people who thrive on chaos. You stop needing to unpack your worth in rooms that weren't built to hold it. That is the shift. When you begin to value your energy more than your image, when you prioritize your alignment over their agreement, when you realize that explaining yourself to those who want power over you is just another form of self-abandonment. Let them misread your silence. Let them twist your clarity. Let them create stories in their head that help them sleep at night. That's their healing to do, not yours. You are not responsible for how your truth feels to someone still hiding from theirs. And if they choose to label you cold, distant, arrogant, difficult, that is the cost of walking away from confusion. That is the cost of choosing wholeness over performance. When you stop explaining, your energy changes. It becomes focused, grounded, magnetic. People feel the shift. They sense the difference. And some will fall away, not because you pushed them, but because your silence spoke too clearly. Your peace became too loud, your presence too powerful to be manipulated. And the ones who are meant to stay won't need an explanation to do so. They'll recognize your stillness. They'll honor your boundaries. They'll meet you where you are, not where it's convenient for them to keep you. This is your becoming, not through noise, but through quiet reclamation. You no longer exist to be understood by everyone. You exist to be true to yourself. And the more you honor that, the more unshakable you become. No longer explaining, just existing. Just free. You don't need to be less of yourself to be loved. You don't need to shrink your spirit, censor your truth, or dull your brilliance just to keep people comfortable. If someone only values you when you are quiet, agreeable, or easy to control, they never valued you. They valued the version of you that required the least effort to tolerate. And that's not love. That's convenience. It's time to stop offering yourself to people who only show up when it's easy for them. It's time to stop bending your authenticity to fit within the lines of someone else's limited understanding. You are not here to be convenient. You are here to be real. The moment you stop explaining, you begin to reclaim everything you gave away trying to be accepted. You reclaim your boundaries. You reclaim your voice. You reclaim your identity. Not the one shaped by approval, but the one born from truth. That kind of reclamation is powerful because it disrupts the entire system that tried to silence you. When you no longer need to justify your peace, you threaten every relationship built on your silence, and some will fight that. Some will label your growth as disloyalty. Some will try to guilt you back into smallness. Not because you're wrong, but because you're rising. And your rise reminds them of their choice to stay stuck. But you're not going back. You've done the work. You've sat with the pain. You've unlearned the lies. You've rebuilt yourself from the ground up. And now, you don't owe anyone an explanation for the space you take up. Your healing does not need validation. Your truth does not need applause. Your boundaries are not up for debate. You have earned your clarity. You have earned your stillness. You have earned the right to walk away without a single word when someone demands more of your soul than they're willing to respect. That kind of strength is rare. And it's sacred. Because it's not loud. It doesn't seek revenge. It doesn't beg for closure. It simply walks forward. And that walk is what changes everything. Not the argument. Not the justification. Not the emotional labor. The walk, the quiet departure, the refusal to keep bleeding for those who only show up to watch. That's what teaches the world how to treat you. Not your explanations, not your kindness in the face of cruelty, not your ability to rationalize someone else's disrespect, but your standards, your silence, your exit. Every time you choose yourself over their comfort, you rewrite your story. You become the one who no longer asks permission to exist. You become the one who leads with peace, not performance. And you finally feel what it means to live in alignment, with no need to explain, no need to defend, no need to dilute who you are just to be enough. You are already enough. You always were. And now, you walk like it, speak like it, live like it, fully, freely, without apology, without explanation. You are not here to beg for understanding. You are not here to hand over your soul in pieces, hoping someone will finally see your worth. If they wanted to understand you, they would. If they respected your growth, they would celebrate it, not question it. If they valued your presence, they wouldn't need an explanation every time you chose peace over pleasing. You have explained enough. You have over-explained, and all it did was drain you. Every justification pulled you further from your power. Every attempt to defend your heart to someone who only wanted to challenge it chipped away at your light. That's not clarity, that's bondage, and it ends now. There comes a point where you realize that being misunderstood is not the worst thing that can happen. Being misunderstood while constantly trying to please everyone is. Because it costs you something real, your self-respect. You cannot keep handing over your truth like it's negotiable. You cannot keep opening the doors of your spirit to people who only enter to rearrange what they don't understand. You are not a puzzle to be solved. You are a force to be met. And the ones meant for you will meet you there, with no need for you to dilute, disguise, or defend what makes you whole. When you stop explaining, you begin to feel something unfamiliar at first, your own approval. And that is everything. Because when you approve of yourself, you don't chase it in others. You don't shrink to earn it. You don't overfunction just to feel seen. You move differently. You speak with a calm certainty. You walk with grounded power. You stop waiting for permission to feel free. And you begin to trust that those who misunderstand you are not your assignment to fix. They are your signal to release. Let them be confused. Let them speculate. Let them create narratives to protect their fragile egos. You don't have to carry the weight of their limitations. You don't have to make your healing digestible to people who are still committed to their own pain. You don't have to shape your life around the comfort zones of those who never intended to grow with you. That's not loyalty. That's self-betrayal disguised as love. And love should never cost you your voice. You are rising into a version of yourself that doesn't flinch at disapproval. A version that doesn't tremble at the thought of being misunderstood. A version that knows silence is not weakness, it's mastery. It is the art of no longer performing. It is the wisdom of no longer giving your soul away to those who only consume, never honor. And it is the strength of finally living in your own truth, not theirs. This is the shift that sets you free. When your peace matters more than their praise. When your truth matters more than their comfort. When your life becomes yours again, unapologetically, unapologetically, unapologetically. You don't owe anyone access to the parts of you they've proven they can't respect. You don't owe continued presence to the people who only ever applauded your silence but flinched when you started to speak. The truth is, not everyone deserves a front row seat to your evolution. Some people were only comfortable with your brokenness. They liked you better when you were unsure, when you were smaller, when you were still begging for crumbs of acknowledgement. But now you're awake. Now you see clearly. And now you must stop explaining your power to those who fear it. There is no honor in begging for basic respect. There is no growth in constantly lowering your frequency just to maintain peace with those who refuse to rise. If your strength makes them uncomfortable, let it. If your boundaries upset them, let them be upset. If your silence disrupts their control, let them sit in that discomfort.
It's not your burden, that's their reflection.
And you are not here to carry what they refuse to confront. You have spent enough time trying to translate your heart into languages that don't even exist for people who were never listening. Enough time trying to prove your value to the very ones who only showed up to diminish it. Enough time being soft where you needed to be solid. You don't have to become harsh, but you must become clear. You don't have to become cold, but you must become untouchable to manipulation, guilt, and emotional games. The ones who guilt-trip your growth are not confused. They are threatened. And that's their problem, not your responsibility. Every time you rise, you break the mold they tried to trap you in. Every time you say no without guilt, you reclaim a part of yourself they thought they owned. Every time you refuse to explain your healing, your change, your vision, you reclaim your time, your energy, your future. You were not born to convince demons to see your light. You were born to walk in that light, no matter who chooses to stay in the shadows. So let them misunderstand you. Let them twist your silence into arrogance, your peace into distance, your boundaries into betrayal. Let them. Because you've got bigger things to do than manage their discomfort. You've got a life to build, a soul to protect, a vision to manifest. And that only happens when you stop handing out explanations like confessions and start living like you believe in who you've become. You're not bitter. You're not heartless. You're just finally protecting the version of you that used to break just to keep everyone else whole. And now that you've seen the cost of constantly explaining yourself, you will never go back to begging to be understood. You don't need to be understood to be powerful. You only need to be aligned, rooted, clear. Let the rest fall away. It was never yours to carry. You don't have to keep justifying your peace to people who only showed up for your chaos. You don't have to explain your distance to those who were only close when you were lost. They were comfortable with your confusion because it made them feel in control. But now that you've chosen clarity, they call it betrayal. Now that you've chosen to love yourself loudly, they whisper that you've changed. And they're right, you have. You've changed in all the ways you were supposed to. You're no longer shrinking for their comfort. You're no longer performing pain just to make others feel superior. You've chosen to rise, and that decision doesn't come with apologies. There is a sacred power in no longer seeking permission to be whole. You don't have to ask anyone if your healing makes sense. You don't have to gather approval for every boundary you set. If something violates your peace, it's a full sentence. If something insults your spirit, you walk away. Not with anger, not with noise, just with certainty. That kind of silence isn't cold, it's divine. It's the sound of a person who's finally stopped negotiating with the parts of themselves that wanted to be accepted by people who were never capable of loving them well. Stop explaining why you're unavailable for conversations that go nowhere. Stop justifying why you no longer dance with chaos just to feel needed. People who confuse drama with depth will always try to label your peace as detachment. Let them. People who define loyalty as self-abandonment will always accuse your growth of being selfish. Let them. You don't owe them your suffering to prove your sincerity. You don't have to bleed in front of them for your wounds to be valid. You don't have to destroy your joy to make their comfort zone feel safe. This is your life, not a courtroom, not a debate stage, not an endless interview for approval. You were not born to convince those who thrive on confusion that your clarity is a threat. You were born to protect the light inside you, even when it offends those who chose to stay in the dark. And that protection begins the moment you stop responding to disrespect disguised as concern, to criticism dressed as care. You owe yourself the kind of love that doesn't flinch under pressure, the kind that doesn't need a crowd to feel real. Walk away quietly from anyone who makes your truth feel too loud. You'll never regret choosing yourself, but you'll always regret staying where your soul was starving. You weren't created to be understood by everyone. You were created to become someone that doesn't need to be explained. Hold your head high. Not out of pride, but out of alignment. Out of the unshakable knowing that you're finally done explaining your wings to people who were never meant to fly with you. Keep soaring. Let the silence speak what words no longer need to. If someone cannot recognize your value without a full explanation, they were never meant to hold space for your worth. You are not responsible for translating your growth to people who only learn to speak in limitation. Some will call your transformation arrogance because it exposes their stagnation. Others will label your discipline as distance because they only felt close to the version of you that abandoned yourself. But truth doesn't need to be defended. Freedom doesn't need to be justified. Your evolution is not a public statement. It is a personal revolution. Every time you try to explain why you're no longer available for dysfunction, you reopen the doors you've fought so hard to close. You pour energy into empty vessels, hoping that one day they'll see you clearly, when deep down you know, they don't want to see you, they want to shape you. They want you to mold yourself to fit the narrative that makes them feel superior, but the cost of approval is too high when it comes at the price of your soul. The longer you stay where you have to defend your light, the dimmer it becomes. Peace is a frequency. Not everyone is tuned to receive it. Some people thrive in noise, in conflict, in confusion. They don't want solutions, they want attention. They don't seek clarity. They crave control. And when you stop playing into the drama, they feel threatened. Not because you did anything wrong, but because your stillness makes their chaos louder. Your boundaries become a mirror they cannot avoid. And when they look into it, they're forced to confront everything they've been avoiding in themselves. So they project, they accuse, they twist your silence into guilt. Don't absorb it. There is no need to argue with someone committed to misunderstanding you. There is no benefit in defending your peace to someone addicted to war. Not every opinion deserves your response. Not every insult deserves your energy. The most powerful statement you can ever make is the one you don't say, because your presence is already spoken. You show the world what you will and won't tolerate by what you continue to engage with. Let your actions declare what your voice no longer needs to repeat. There will come a day when you stop apologizing for who you're becoming, when you stop flinching at the thought of being misunderstood. That day comes the moment you realize that your healing isn't up for debate. Your transformation is not a negotiation. You are allowed to grow beyond what people predicted for you. You are allowed to be more than their comfort zones allowed them to imagine. And you are allowed to do so without explanation. Let go of the need to be seen by people who never cared to look beyond your wounds. You are not here to prove yourself. You are here to become yourself. Keep walking in that truth. Let it be enough. Let it be everything.